My name is Jennifer Chin, and this is the story of how I discovered that the person who speaks the least often holds the most influence. For 15 years, I worked quietly behind the curtain at Chin Global Solutions, the tech company my brother Michael and I inherited from our father. Michael was the public face, magnetic, confident, the one everyone saw. I was the one in the background, laying the foundation piece by piece. But when you spend enough time in the shadows, you begin to see people for who they really are. I can still trace it back to the very beginning, when our business was just a scrappy little IT consulting firm operating out of a renovated warehouse in Silicon Valley. Dad had built it from nothing, teaching himself how to code while juggling 3 jobs to keep us afloat after we immigrated from Taiwan. Michael was always the favored son, outgoing, likable, destined to shine. I was the quiet sibling, the girl who stayed in on weekends, teaching herself programming while others went out to celebrate. When Dad passed away 5 years ago, he left us equal ownership of the company. Look out for each other, he told us before the end. Together, you can build something remarkable. What he never realized was that I'd already been working on something remarkable, a groundbreaking cybersecurity platform funded by ad revenue, the very innovation that would propel our tiny firm into a billion-dollar empire. The trouble started 3 years ago, when Michael crossed paths with Victoria at a tech conference. She was everything I wasn't: tall, sophisticated, with a Stanford MBA and a resume stacked with prestigious companies. 6 months later, they were married. Within a year, she had convinced Michael to bring her into the business. "Vicky's got incredible financial expertise, Jen," Michael said, his voice lit with enthusiasm. "She's exactly what we need to grow." I forced a smile, swallowed my doubts, and said nothing. What Michael never realized was that I'd already secured multiple funding deals through my own network. Our growth trajectory was well in motion long before Victoria entered the picture. She began as a financial consultant, but her intentions were obvious from the start. She pushed her way into executive meetings, offered unsolicited opinions on everything from marketing to R&D, and gradually filled leadership positions with her old business school allies. I stayed quiet in my corner office, pouring myself into technology and client relationships. To her, I wasn't a founder or a visionary. I was just Michael's quiet sister. The tension simmered between us, until last week's celebration changed everything. Victoria had just secured the role of CFO, a position she had pursued with relentless determination. To mark the occasion, she hosted an extravagant event at the Four Seasons, gathering Silicon Valley's power players, venture capitalists, tech journalists, influencers, anyone who could polish her rising reputation. I arrived early, dressed in a simple black gown meant to convey quiet elegance. She swept in later, dazzling in couture worth more than most people's yearly salaries. When I stepped forward to congratulate her, she turned to one of her Stanford friends and, in a voice loud enough for the nearest circle to hear, quipped, "Why is the cleaning maid here? This is an executive party." The room didn't go silent. Silicon Valley parties never do. But I felt the ripple of uneasy glances. Michael stood nearby, visibly uncomfortable, yet said nothing. His silence hurt more than her insult. Victoria smirked, pretending an apology. "Oh, that's right. You're Michael's sister. I hardly notice you at the real company events. You're always tucked away in that little office. But I suppose someone has to handle the technical grunt work." She let out a light laugh, dismissing me before turning back to her admirers. I took in every word, every condescending glance. All the years of being underestimated condensed into that single moment. But I didn't break. I didn't snap. I raised my glass, smiled, and said, "Congratulations on the new role, Victoria. Tomorrow should be very interesting." She barely looked at me. Michael caught my eye, but I shook my head and slipped out before dessert. I had work to do. That night, in my home office, I unlocked files I had long hoped would remain untouched. What Victoria had never cared to learn was that 3 years earlier, Michael had sold me 17% of his shares to avoid outside investors. Desperate to impress her, he had signed the contract without so much as glancing at the fine print, which meant that I, quiet, invisible Jennifer, held 67% of Chin Global Solutions. I worked until dawn, drafting emails to board members, speaking with legal counsel, preparing the necessary announcements. As the sun broke over Silicon Valley, my resolve hardened. Dad had told us to take care of each other. But sometimes protecting the company means making brutal choices. The next morning, I arrived early to the boardroom. At exactly 9 a.m., Victoria swept in with a victorious smile and her orientation papers in hand. That smile faltered the instant she saw me at the head of the table, surrounded by board members on video calls, legal advisors, and a visibly shaken Michael. "Jennifer, what is this?" she demanded. "I'm here for my CFO orientation." "Actually, Victoria," I said evenly, "we need to talk about some changes to the company's structure." Her mask cracked. "What changes?" I opened my laptop, projecting the document onto the main screen. "As of this morning, I'm exercising my rights as majority shareholder of Chin Global Solutions to restructure leadership." "Majority shareholder?" She gave a brittle laugh. "That's impossible. Michael and I control 67%. "I own 67%, I corrected quietly. "Would you like to see the paperwork?" I displayed the ownership breakdown. Her expression cycled from disbelief to fury to panic. She turned on Michael, voice low and venomous. "This can't be real," she hissed. "Tell me this isn't real. Tell her this isn't true." Michael looked like he'd aged a decade overnight. His voice was low, resigned. "It's true. I sold Jen part of my shares. I never thought." "Never thought what?" Victoria snapped. "That your little mouse of a sister would actually use her power?" I raised a hand to steady the room. "This isn't a fight, Victoria. It's a correction." Turning to the board, I continued. "As the documents show, recent decisions have raised serious concerns. Unqualified hires at inflated salaries, critical R&D funds redirected to marketing, and an attempted sale of our core patents to a competitor." The room went still. For the first time, no one was looking at Victoria. They were all looking at me, the quiet one, the overlooked one, realizing where the real power sat. Victoria's face drained of color. "How did you know about the patent sale?" "I built our security systems," I said simply, finishing her thought. "Did you really believe I wouldn't have safeguards in place to track unauthorized access to our intellectual property?" One of the board members cleared his throat. "Ms. Chin, Jennifer, we've reviewed everything you sent. The board fully supports your restructuring." I nodded in acknowledgement, then turned back to Victoria. "Effective immediately, your position as CFO is terminated. Security will escort you out." I pressed a button on my phone, and 2 guards entered the room. "You can't do this." Victoria's polished veneer cracked at last. She whirled toward my brother. "Michael, are you really going to let her destroy everything we've built?" "Everything we've built?" I rose slowly to my feet. "Victoria, while you were busy throwing parties and giving interviews about being a woman in tech, I was the one building this company's future. That security platform you try to sell, I developed it. Those big clients you flaunted, I brought them in. The technical details you brushed aside, they're worth billions." Victoria turned to Michael, desperate. "Do something." For a moment, I saw a flash of the brother who once stood up for me on the playground. But this was no playground, and we weren't children anymore. "I'm sorry, Vicky," Michael said quietly. "Jen's right. We lost sight of what this company is really about." As the guards led her out, her voice echoing down the hall in bitter threats, I felt no triumph. This wasn't revenge. It was protection of our father's legacy, of our company's future, and even of Michael, blinded by charm and ambition. The following weeks blurred together. I overhauled the executive team, rehiring the talented people Victoria had pushed aside. We shifted our focus back to innovation. When we unveiled our new suite of security patents, the stock soared. Michael and I began working late nights in the conference room we once shared with Dad. "I forgot who you really are," Michael admitted one evening. "I started seeing you through Victoria's eyes instead of my own." "We both forgot," I told him. "Family means being honest with each other, even when it hurts." 3 months later, an envelope arrived, divorce papers from Victoria's lawyer, demanding a large settlement. Michael signed without hesitation. "You know," he said, setting down the pen, "Dad always said you were the smart one." I smiled. He said we were both smart in different ways. And he was right. We just had to remember how to work together. A year has passed since that night Victoria called me the cleaning maid. Chin Global Solutions has tripled in value. Our system is on its way to becoming the industry standard. Michael manages our public presence. I drive innovation. Last week, I delivered the keynote at a major tech conference. Standing on stage, looking out at the sea of faces, I thought about all the quiet people, the ones underestimated, overlooked, written off. Success isn't about being the loudest voice in the room, I told them. It's about being the most observant, the most prepared. Sometimes it's about being the quietest. Because true power doesn't come from titles or corner offices. It comes from knowing your worth and standing firm when it matters most. As for Victoria, I hear she's at a small startup, still telling anyone who will listen that she was once CFO of Chin Global Solutions. Sometimes I see her quoted in articles about women in tech. I can't help but smile. She still doesn't understand leadership isn't about the title you hold. It's about the value you create. On my desk, I keep Dad's picture. His kind eyes remind me of his last words, take care of each other. And in my own way, I did. I protected my brother, our company, and our legacy. Sometimes taking care means making hard choices. But if you stay true to your principles, you'll never lose your way. The cleaning maid, it turns out, knew exactly what she was doing all along.